Unicorns! And now that's out of the way, let's discuss unicorns.
The unicorn is an interesting beast in that, despite unicorn-like creatures appearing in a number of mythologies, it is always portrayed as a positive symbol. In the West, unicorn-like creatures are usually referred to with an adjective denoting their origin. For example, the wherein is called an Easter unicorn, and the karkadan is called a Turkish unicorn. The image of a mammalian animal with a single horn on its forehead persists throughout the world, but in this episode, we're going to focus on the Western unicorn, which arose from European folklore and traditions. The Greek historian and naturalist Ctesias, or at least that's how Wikipedia claims his name is pronounced, is believed to have recorded the first account of the unicorn in 400 BC. Ctesias traveled throughout Persia and heard many tales of strange animals the likes of which no one in Greece had ever seen. Giraffes and elephants and so many others. It was in these accounts of strange and wondrous beasts that he wrote of the unicorn, a multicolored creature with a lion's tail, a goat's hooves, a deer's head, and a horse's body. According to Ctesias, the horn of the unicorn was white, black, and red. It is ambiguous how tales of the unicorn reached Ctesias, and there are two main theories. The first, of course, is the same effect as a game of telephone, where, over countless retellings, the story of whatever animal it had originally been had morphed into the unicorn legend that Ctesias recorded. The other theory put forth is that Ctesias combined elements from other animals he'd heard about to create the unicorn, most notably the horned rhinoceros. Ctesias' writings are also the origin of another facet of the unicorn legend, the mystical properties ascribed to its horn. According to him, the horn of the unicorn could purify drinks of poison. This is another link connecting the unicorn to the rhinoceros, as similar legends exist concerning rhino horns. As the tale of the unicorn caught on and entered popular consciousness, the creature was adopted into European folklore. Whereas Ctesias described the beast as being a native to a distant, far-off land, Europeans began to believe that the creature lived in their own forests, and furthermore, they had evidence. Evidence in the form of narwhals.
More steps and oh my god, it's a narwhal! No, narwhal! Narwhal of death! It's gonna kill us!
Now, I'm going to pause for a moment, since it appears to be a somewhat bafflingly common misconception among many people that narwhals are mythical creatures. They are not.
Narwhals are real animals, people!
Anyway, whalers of the northern Atlantic would bring back narwhal horns, and corpses would occasionally wash up on beaches. I should note that, while horn is the word most often used, narwhals actually have tusks, not horns. Regardless, I'm going to keep referring to them as horns for simplicity's sake, and also force of habit. With these narwhal horns, the idea of the unicorn was reinforced, and the horns were believed by many to belong to unicorns. Like many creatures, unicorns were heavily affected by the spread of Christianity. You see, way back when, some people decided to translate Hebrew scripture into Greek. When confronted with references to horned beasts, such as oxen, they misinterpreted the Hebrew word and translated it as unicorn. When Christianity spread throughout Europe, so too did these erroneous translations, thus giving the impression that the unicorn was a real, biblical, and holy beast. Most English translations of the Bible fix this error, with the notable exception of the King James Version. With these mistranslations, the unicorn became widely accepted and was rolled into Christian folklore. One particular legend claims that when Adam and Eve began naming the animals in the Garden of Eden, the unicorn was the first one they named. When the two were banished from the garden, the unicorn left with them of its own will, sacrificing its time in paradise to aid the lost humans. The common Christian theme of self-sacrifice is clearly present in this story, and, added with other aspects of the myth, such as the unicorn's ability to heal poisons, makes a clear Christ parallel in the animal. In the Middle Ages, the unicorn came to be a symbol of Jesus in particular, and purity in general. Of course, there are other elements to the unicorn's connection with purity.
Now let's talk about sex!
Horns are phallic symbols. I don't think I'm shocking anyone when I say that. I mean, look at them. Hell, we even use the word horny to describe sexual arousal. And the idea of horns symbolizing sexuality is nothing new. It was once, and still is in some parts of the world, a common belief that animal horns have mystical and medicinal properties. One of the most common uses of horns under these belief systems was an aphrodisiac. Remember that human horn episode of Futurama? Yeah, that's actually based on real folklore. I mentioned before the connection between unicorns and rhinos. It is a common belief that rhino horns were used as aphrodisiacs. In truth, this particular practice was actually quite rare, and the idea is mostly born out of a Western misconception of Eastern culture. However, with all this in mind, it becomes clear that unicorns carry a certain sexual symbolism to them. One of the most enduring legends concerning unicorns is that they are usually wild and untamed. You will recall that in the werewolf episode, I discussed the medieval European attitudes toward nature. Naturally, this attitude also extended toward sexuality, as the ability to control one's urges was considered a hallmark of civilized peoples. The legend further continues by claiming that unicorns are only calm in the presence of maidens, virgins. In fact, they would actively seek out maidens and rest their heads on their laps. Okay, I don't know if I'm just looking for symbolism where there isn't any, and sometimes a cigar is just a cigar and whatnot, but the untamed beast rests its head, which contains a phallic symbol, in the lap of a virgin. I should also note that unicorn hunters would use these virgins to trap unicorns and kill them, and these maidens are often portrayed as innocent pawns of the hunters, used without realizing that they are luring the unicorn to its death. Though I imagine that when the hunters take their prize, the maiden loses that innocence quickly enough. In other words, this legend is the story of a fall from innocence, and could possibly be read as an allegory for losing one's virginity. But it should be noted that the unicorn doesn't actually try to harm the maiden. Its actions are actually somewhat chaste. It is the hunters who truly bring about the loss of innocence. And as the unicorn is connected with purity, which is also connected with virginity, perhaps the unicorn itself symbolizes virginity. The hunters use the maiden to eliminate the unicorn, the virginity, the purity. In a sense, this legend could be read as a warning to maidens to guard their virginity closely, as at the time, this was considered one of the greatest prizes a woman had to offer. Of course, this interpretation is conjecture on my part, and I'm not exactly a doctor of folklore. So I may be completely wrong, but I still think it's worth pondering at least. Today, the unicorn remains a symbol of what is good and pure. It is an innocent and beautiful and gentle creature. They are mystical and they are mysterious. Compared to many mythical creatures, they are remarkably unchanged from their roots, and I think that the unicorn will persist as a symbol of purity.
After all, humans sometimes need to be reminded that, for all its faults, the world is still a place that houses goodness and purity. And what better symbol for that is there than the unicorn?